Tonight, the tropics are quiet at the moment, although we are monitoring the eastern Pacific for potential development in the early parts of next week. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for June 9th. Well, it's another quiet day in the wide world of tropics with no tropical cyclones active. The storm total for this year remains around 28, with the average being 92 for the entire year. Could unclassified given the fact that we only have one single AOI with a chance of forming at this time. Going into day 9 of Atlantic hurricane season, no storms are active and none are expected in the next 5 days. There was signals that something could spawn off the Central American gyre again, but it does not appear that that will be the case for the near future. Going on over into the Eastern Pacific, we could be seeing the second storm of the season in several days, given the fact that we have a 60% chance of development to the south of Mexico. It is likely that it will track westward, and probably not too much more than become a tropical storm. We're not really anticipating anything big out of this at the moment. In the Western Pacific, you can see what's going on here. There's no storms active. If you remember, last night we had Invest 95W and 96W, things that only lasted 12 or 18 hours respectively. And we're not sure why those were designated, but it seems to be a common trend, every single cloud getting designated in Invest in the Western Pacific. In the North Indian Ocean, you can see what's going on here. Nothing as well. It's a blank slate. We are past the first peak of the season. 93S is still active in the southern hemisphere, but for the umpteenth day in a row, it is still a 0% chance of formation. So with that being said, here's the Atlantic satellite imagery, and you can see what's going on here. Not really much. You can kind of still see a little bit of a trace of what's left of Alex all the way to the northeast of Newfoundland at this point. Other than that, not really much of anything that's going to be developing into any tropical cyclone in the near future. In the Eastern Pacific, you can't really make out the low that's going to eventually become that AOI that we're tracking here. That low is probably going to be forming this weekend. Or tomorrow night, but as of right now, we are looking at that 60% chance. Otherwise, the rest of the basin looks relatively dry, especially in the western part of the Eastern Pacific and much of the Central Pacific in general. So that is interesting to note here. Just not much anything going on. Everything confined next to Mexico here. And in the Western Pacific, you can see what's going on. 95 and 96W, of course, falling apart. 96W was never anything. But, of course, every single cloud seems to become something, so I'm sure that we'll get 97W off some random cloud in a few days or so, if that, at this point. In the North Indian Ocean, you can see what's going on here. It's a monsoonal mess in the Bay of Bengal, as per usual, and in the Arabian Sea. There's a little bit of a small disturbance, but it looks like it's getting quickly killed off due to the amount of dry air in place. And as we have no Invest active, we are looking at this giant cloud mass that's in portions of the United States right now, specifically in Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama. It's producing severe weather, and that's basically the best we've got. It's like the best thing that we got looking right now, and therefore we decided it was a good idea to use that. In the Eastern Pacific, you can see what's going on here. Sea surface temperatures around 27 to 28 degrees Celsius throughout much of the basin. Still a bit of a cold pool left behind by Agatha there. Central Pacific remaining around 25 to 26. In the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean, it's around 27 to 28. And in the main development region, it's around 26 to 27, with sub-areas of 28 in the southern parts. In the subtropics, it's around 25 to 26, and it's not really the perfect time for tropical cyclone development yet, but obviously those temperatures are warming, and that will be something to watch as we head into July. Well, it's June now, we'll be heading into July. But anyways, in the Bay of Bengal, you can see temperatures around 28 to 29, Arabian Sea, it's around 29 to 30. Western Pacific, we're looking at those temperatures of 30 degrees Celsius continuing to expand across the Western Pacific, especially near the Mariana Islands at this point. Rest of the basin is around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, so pretty good waters. It's just the environmental conditions there are just complete garbage. In the southern hemisphere, the temperatures continue to cool to around 25 to 26 throughout much of the basin, unless you're in the northern Australian region, where it's still holding on to 28 to 29. Here are the sea surface temperature anomalies. You can see our weak La Nina that's been kind of slightly weaker than what it was about a week ago, but temperatures remain above average in the Atlantic and in the Western Pacific, especially that little warm spot north of Hawaii there. That is interesting to note here at this time. On this day, June 9th, 1998, we had 3A. Of course, North Indian Ocean cyclones did not have names back then. It was labeled as the 1998 Gujarat cyclone, and it did make landfall in the Indian state of Gujarat, killing thousands of people. It is unknown how many people killed, range between 4,000 and 10,000. Of course, it did take quite a while for that area to recover, as it really was an unprecedented event with 3A. You can find more of our On This Day products by Cyclone History. Their Twitter is on the bottom bar below. Well, with that being said, that brings us over to the next names. In the Atlantic, the next two names here are Bonnie, followed by Colin. In the Eastern Pacific, we're looking out for Bloss and Celia. And in the Central Pacific, while Elon Musk claims that the Cybertruck is the future, we can tell you right now that that future does not involve Hone. Moving on over into the Western Pacific, the next name here is Chaba, followed by Irie. And in the North Indian Ocean, the next name here is Citrang, followed by Mandus. It feels like a broken record that I've been saying these Western Pacific, North Indian Oceans for quite some time now, given the Western Pacific hasn't seen a storm in nearly 2 months now. In the Australian region, the next name is Darian. In the Southwestern Indian Ocean, we're looking out for Lama. And in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Holly. We'll be back for another Tropical Weather Bulletin, as always, tomorrow night.